Let me tell you about the day I almost died. Not the day at Ford's Theater, not the battlefield dangers, not the illnesses that took my children. I'm talking about the day I wanted to die. February 1841. I was 32 years old. I had just broken my engagement to Mary Todd, the woman I loved, because I was terrified of marriage, terrified of my own melancholy, terrified that I would destroy her as I destroyed everything I touched. I walked the streets of Springfield, Illinois in the dead of winter. No coat, no destination. For hours. My friends later told me they had never seen such despair in a man's eyes. They took turns watching me, afraid I would walk into the river. And that night in a boarding house room, alone, I made a decision. Not the decision you're thinking. I didn't decide to end my life. I decided to rebuild it. Like a carpenter tears down a crooked wall and starts fresh with new lumber. That decision, that single choice in the coldest hour, changed everything. And tonight, I'm going to show you exactly how to make that same choice, no matter what wall has collapsed in your life right now. My name is Abraham Lincoln, and this is the Carpenter's Code. You need to understand what led to that winter night. I was a lawyer in Springfield, successful enough, known for my storytelling, my honesty, my ridiculous appearance, tall, gangly, clothes that never fit right. I was the guy people laughed with, but not the guy women dreamed of. Then I met Mary Todd. She was educated, cultured, from a prominent Kentucky family. She could have had any man in Springfield. She chose me. Me, the awkward frontiersman who still had dirt under his fingernails from splitting rails. But as the wedding day approached, something broke inside me. I started having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. I would wake up gasping, convinced I was making a terrible mistake. Not because I didn't love Mary, but because I didn't trust myself. I had watched my own father destroy my mother with his coldness, his rigidity, his emotional poverty. What if I was the same? What if I passed that poison to my children? So I ran. On January 1st, 1841, I didn't show up to my own wedding. I left Mary at the altar. I humiliated her. I humiliated myself. I became the laughingstock of Springfield. For weeks, I couldn't function. I couldn't try cases. I couldn't speak to friends. I sat in my law office staring at walls, or I walked those frozen streets until my feet bled. And here's what I learned in that darkness. Here's what you need to write down. The moment you think you've destroyed your life is often the moment you're about to rebuild it properly. You see, I had been building my life like a bad carpenter, rushing, cutting corners, using warped lumber because it was available instead of waiting for the straight grain, trying to impress others instead of building something true. My marriage to Mary wasn't wrong, but my reasoning was wrong. I was marrying to escape loneliness, to prove I was normal, to check a box. Not because I had built the internal foundation to be a husband and father. That winter night, I didn't just decide to live. I decided to build differently. I started studying marriage like a craft. I talked to happy couples. I read about communication. I examined my own emotional patterns with the same rigor I applied to legal cases. I went to Mary, not immediately, not easily, and I explained. I opened the darkest corners of my mind to her, and I asked if she could love a man who came with shadows. She said yes. Not because I was fixed, I wasn't, but because I was honest. Because I had stopped pretending to be the polished gentleman and started being the earnest carpenter, showing her the blueprint of my soul, warped boards and all. We married in 1842. It wasn't perfect. We fought. We suffered losses that would break most people. But we built something real. something that could weather storms because it wasn't built on sand. Pause. Direct eye contact. What are you building right now? And are you using warped lumber because you're in a hurry? Fast forward to 1854. I'm 45 years old, and I'm politically dead. The Kansas-Nebraska Act has just passed. Stephen Douglas, my rival, the man I lost to, the polished politician I envied, has opened the Western territories to slavery. The Missouri Compromise, which kept slavery contained, is destroyed, and I was on the sidelines. For 5 years, I had barely been involved in politics. After my one term in Congress ended in 1849, I thought my political career was over. I focused on law, made good money, became known as one of the best railroad lawyers in Illinois. Comfortable, safe, and completely empty. I would ride the circuit, traveling from town to town with other lawyers, trying cases in county courthouses, and I would watch farmers, merchants, ordinary people struggling with questions of right and wrong. And I would think, I should be helping shape these answers, not just arguing over property lines and contracts. But I was afraid of losing again, afraid of the humiliation, afraid that I was too old, too defeated, too forgotten to matter. Then the Kansas-Nebraska Act passed, and something ignited in me. Not anger, though I was angry. Not ambition, though I had ambition. But a craftsman's clarity. I saw that the house of American liberty was being built on a rotten foundation, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had the skills to help rebuild it. Here's the second principle of the Carpenter's Code. You don't need to be the best. You need to be the most prepared when the opportunity arrives. I spent the next 3 months doing nothing but research. I read every speech Douglas had made. I studied the history of slavery legislation going back to the founding. I wrote and rewrote my arguments until they were sharp as a chisel. In October 1854, I gave a 3-hour speech in Peoria, Illinois. Just me, a crowd that started small and grew as word spread, and the most important argument of my life. I didn't attack Douglas personally. I attacked the logic of his position. I showed, step by step, like a geometric proof, that popular sovereignty was moral cowardice disguised as democracy, that you can't vote on whether someone has rights, that the House of Freedom cannot stand half slave and half free. The speech was printed in newspapers. People started remembering my name. But more importantly, I remembered who I was. Not a failed congressman, not a comfortable lawyer, a builder, a man who could take the raw materials of ideas and construct something that would outlast him. From 1854 to 1860, 6 years, I built. Speech by speech, debate by debate, coalition by coalition. I lost the Senate race to Douglas in 1858, lost it spectacularly, despite the famous debates. But I didn't stop building. Because here's what carpenters know that others forget. The foundation is invisible. Nobody applauds the foundation, but without it, the house collapses. Those 6 years of failure were my foundation. When the Republican convention met in Chicago in 1860, I wasn't the favorite. I was the dark horse. But I was the only one with the blueprint ready. The only one who had built the arguments, the alliances, the moral case that could unite a divided party. I won the nomination, and then the presidency. Not because I was lucky, because I was ready when the structure I had built finally met the storm it was designed for. What foundation are you building right now that nobody sees? Don't stop. The storm is coming, and it will test what you've built. Now I must tell you about the hardest build of all. When I took office in March 1861, 7 states had already left the Union. By April, shots were fired at Fort Sumter. The house I had been elected to preserve was burning down around me, and I was not prepared. Oh, I had prepared politically, but I had not prepared for this, for the death, the suffering, the impossible choices. I had never commanded anything larger than a militia company 30 years earlier. I had never studied military strategy. I was a lawyer, a politician, a storyteller, not a war leader. The first year was catastrophe. General McClellan, who I thought would save us, wouldn't fight. He had the army, he had the supplies, he had everything, and he wouldn't move. He was afraid of failure, so he prepared endlessly, trained endlessly, and let the enemy grow stronger while he waited for perfect conditions. I would walk to the War Department at night, alone, to read the telegrams. Bad news, always bad news. Bull Run, Ball's Bluff, thousands of young men dead for nothing. Mothers writing me letters, their words wet with tears, asking why their sons had to die. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. I suspended habeas corpus illegally. Yes, illegally. I knew it even then, because I was desperate to keep Maryland from seceding. I approved strategies that failed. I trusted men who betrayed me. And in February 1862, my son Willie died, 11 years old, the brightest of my boys, the one who organized mock cabinets in the White House attic, who named his pet goat after a cabinet member, who made me laugh when nothing else could. Typhoid fever, probably from the polluted water in Washington, probably preventable if we had known. But we didn't know. And he died in my arms, or as close as they would let me get, while the nation needed its president, and I could barely breathe. Mary collapsed. She couldn't function. She couldn't attend his funeral. I had to stand there, at the grave, with my other son Tad sobbing beside me, and pretend to be strong for a nation that was also sobbing. That night I went to the cemetery, alone, in the rain. I opened his coffin and held his body. I don't know how long, hours probably. I talked to him. I begged him to wake up. I made promises I couldn't keep. And then, I walked back to the White House. And I kept being president. Not because I was strong, not because I had faith, because I had a craftsman's discipline, because I understood something that saved my life. The work doesn't care about your feelings. The work only cares that you show up. I couldn't save Willie, but I could save other people's sons. I could win this war. I could end slavery. I could prove that the last best hope of Earth wouldn't die because its president was heartbroken. So I learned. I studied military tactics until midnight. I read everything I could find. I asked questions that generals found insulting, coming from a backwoods lawyer. I fired McClellan eventually. Hired Grant, a man who drank too much, who had failed in civilian life, but who understood what I understood. That you win by fighting, not by waiting for perfect conditions. And slowly, painfully, we turned the tide. But here's what I want you to remember from this story. I never stopped being broken. I just built around the breaks. The carpenter doesn't throw away a board because it has a knot. He works with the knot. He places it where it won't weaken the structure, or he uses it for a different purpose, or he fills it with glue and sawdust and makes it stronger than the surrounding wood. Your trauma, your loss, your failures, they are your knots. They don't disqualify you. They are part of your grain. Use them. Build with them. Let them make you unique. March 1865. The war was ending. We could feel it. Grant had Lee pinned at Petersburg. Sherman was marching through Georgia. After 4 years of hell, 620,000 dead, entire generations wiped out. We were going to win. And I had to give a speech, my second inaugural address. Traditionally, these were celebrations, lists of accomplishments, promises of prosperity, the political equivalent of a victory lap. I wrote something different. I wrote about why the war happened, about how both sides read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other, about how slavery was the offense that brought this judgment, about how God gives to both North and South this terrible war as the woe due to those by whom the offense came. And I ended with these words I want you to hear, really hear, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Malice toward none, charity for all. After everything, after the insults, the betrayals, the assassination plots, the death of my son, the destruction of my peace of mind, I was calling for mercy. Not because I was a saint, I wasn't. I had my hatreds, my resentments, my dark nights of the soul. But because I understood, finally, the last principle of the carpenter's code. What you build is more important than who hurts you while you're building. I could have used that speech to punish the South, to demand revenge, to feed the hunger for justice that burns in every human heart when they've been wronged. But what would that have built? A nation chained to its past, a peace built on bitterness that would crack within a generation. I wanted to build something that would last, something my children, my surviving children, could inherit without shame. Something that would prove, 4 years of blood later, that America could be not just powerful, but good. I gave that speech on March 4th, 1865. A month later, I was dead. But that speech survived. That vision survived. Because I built it true. I built it with malice toward none, charity for all, and the best lumber I had, even though I was broken inside. So here is my question to you, right now, wherever you are. What are you building? Not what are you doing for money, not what are you scrolling through, not what are you planning to start someday. What are you building today? Because I don't care if you're 17 or 70. I don't care if you failed 10 times or 10,000. I don't care if you're broken, bankrupt, betrayed, or beaten down. You have materials, right now, in your hands, your mind, your time, your choices, your capacity to learn one new thing today, your ability to reach out to one person today, your power to decide, right now, that you will not let this day pass without laying one true board in the structure of your life. The carpenter's code is simple. Measure twice, cut once. Think before you act. Plan your life like you plan a house. Know what you want before you start swinging the hammer. Use the best materials you can find. Feed your mind. Surround yourself with people who build, not destroy. Read books that challenge you. Have conversations that scare you. Build around the knots. Your wounds are not waste. Your failures are not garbage. They are part of your structure. Make them features, not bugs. And finally, work while it's day. I had 56 years, that's all. Not enough to see the peace I built, but enough to build it. You don't know how long you have, neither do I. So build now. Build fast. Build true. I was a depressed, awkward, failed, heartbroken man. who decided one frozen night to stop tearing myself down and start building myself up, one true board at a time. You can do the same, not because you're special, because you're human, because you have hands and a mind and a heart that wants to matter, because the materials are all around you, waiting for a carpenter with the courage to start. Start tonight. Start now. Lay the first board. And when the storms come, and they will come, stand in the house you built with your own two hands, with your own hard-won wisdom, with your own stubborn refusal to quit, and say, I built this, and it will stand. The world needs more builders. Be one of them. I'm Abraham Lincoln, and I believe in you. Now go build something.